that's a big idea in filmmaking anyways. Each project is its own company, is its own business.
So I wanted to say thank you for joining this podcast. And we had like a conversation last week or 2 weeks ago when my car got broken into.
Right.
And
I
so
was
I
like,
will always remember that. But before we get into it, I really wanted to just ask you kind of, more of your background of how you got into Rekon and filmmaking in general, and as well as commercial production, because you've been through, filmmaking, independent filmmaking to commercials and then marketing. And so we'll love to hear your story.
yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. From a very young age, have constantly been criticized or praised. It depends on who's talking to me, for being a master of all trades. That jack of all trades and master of none. There is a second part to that that nobody ever says, which is better all than. It's something about like better some than nothing at all type of thing.
Mhm.
But I grew up outside of Los Angeles. So I grew up in Southern California. And there's just filmmaking. Like it's just in the air. It's part of just what makes Southern California a little bit of Southern California. Like you throw a rock and somebody works in the industry, right? Like I think the first screener I ever saw for the Academy Awards was for Jumanji.
Nice. The
And
first
it was
one,
the first one,
the
the
Robin
first one.
Williams.
Though that's the one, yes. And I'll never forget because like we knew somebody in the industry, so we had been watching it with them. And so I started out just with like access on some level, right? Like access and acknowledgement that it existed around me. And I went to an open casting call, like those open kid casting calls that happen. I was
Nice.
about 7, because a cousin of mine wanted to do it and not because I wanted to. And I went in and I got an agent out of the casting call.
No way.
Yeah. Um,
You were a child talent.
I was a child talent on some level. And I did that for about 2 years, in elementary school. And I was on a couple of film sets. I was in Little Rascals and 90210 and
What?
yeah,
Wow. The Little
yeah.
Rascals. I remember that the 90s Little Rascals was
hmm
pretty good. I
hmm
love that one. And
hmm
90210. Wow. So Luke Perry.
Yeah, I can't remember very well anymore, but like I'm fairly certain that the scene that I did was with Brian Austin Green.
Wow.
Like
Cool.
after he broke up with I've never watched the show, so like I
Yeah.
also like super don't know, but I think it's after he broke up with one of the lead girlfriends. But I did a lot of background work. Like I got
Mhm.
cast out for a lot of background work. I auditioned for a lot of commercial work. I was in a Target commercial. Yeah, I was definitely in a Target commercial for the holidays at one point. But it wasn't really my cup of tea. Like
Mhm.
7, 8, 9 year old, you don't going to auditions is a dredge. Like it's not fun. Even now, like
Mhm.
if you tell me I don't have to sit through a casting session, I'm really excited. Not any disrespect to any actors, because I think that it takes a lot to walk into the room and do that. But it's after sitting through so many of them and also having some other things to do that it's a lot.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I started kind of that way, and that was my roadway into the industry. I left doing that, because again, it was a dredge, and I was a child, um, and I kind of put it in the back of my mind. Like it was a lot of fun. There was a lot to it that I really enjoyed, but it was about being on set that I enjoyed. Like I enjoyed a kind of
Mhm.
energy and a kind of magic that you had with that. And then much further down the road, started uh, I started with a below the line agent. Like that was my first industry job an adult or like a person in the world.
Nice.
Yeah,
A
so
below the line
a
agent.
below the line agent, yeah, for cruise. And I don't
Yeah.
hear a ton of it anymore. Like somebody mentioned
No.
somebody the other day to me, and I was like, oh really? Like that's how I started. Um
Wow.
and she represented DP. Represented
Mhm.
DPs who aren't below the line necessarily, but so DPs, she had a couple of others, production designers. Like I it would trudging back to like remember who she repped, but she repped a handful of crew members, and I got kind of my first exposure to like how jobs were listed and calling studio offices and calling production offices and trying to get people crewed up, and it was a bizarre pool to jump into. Like I knew all those things existed and I kind of, but it's being an agent is also uh, a very specific skill.
Yes.
Um, and so I started from there, and from there I found an opportunity for feature film to go and intern on, just because I could essentially at that point. I think I was still in college, and I went and I interned on an independent feature film, and it
Hmm.
was my boot camp. It's how I
Nice.
learned how to do a lot of things on film sets. And from there, I got a network and I jumped around. So I went and worked for more of a commercial production company based out of LA and Paris that did
Mm.
commercials that were more international. And I worked for them for a couple of years. I worked on um, Paranormal 5, when it came out, which is a Paramount film. So it was a fairly large film. And then
Yeah.
I worked with a producer who had a relationship with Nickelodeon, and I was a
Hmm.
production coordinator, and I did a lot of their promo work for a little while. So I've kind of worked around the world of what is entertainment, just kind of jumping from thing to thing. I went into the film industry with a base knowledge of business.
Hmm.
I had worked for Disney for almost 5 years when I really went into the filmmaking industry, and the foundation of that meant that I understood things like W4s and I-9s,
Yes.
and I understood, keeping that stuff organized and in a way that I think some people don't come to the table with.
Hmm.
So that allowed me to shift around a lot more than I think I might have had I started younger or without that experience or whatnot.
Hmm.
And it just kind of, I proved myself to a lot of people, and I
Hmm.
suddenly I'd worked on a music video, I want to say for Father John Misty,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
with with uh with a good friend. Well, we didn't know each other when we started did the music video, but we became friends. And he went on to direct his first independent feature film that he also wrote.
Mm.
And he gave me a call and was like, "Hey, I know you don't location manage regularly, but I do know you know how." And I was like, "Yeah, yes." And he was like, "Would you possibly do me this favor and like jump on this movie and be the location manager?" And I was a little
Nice.
apprehensive because I was like, that's I don't know if that's something that I like feel incredibly comfortable being a department head in, but I mean,
Mm.
sure. And so I did it, and we made a movie, and it was like 18 locations in 16 days, and
What?
yeah.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
yeah, we shot at the Biltmore in downtown Los Angeles, where like things like West Wing and Blade Runner were also shot.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly we shot the same days that Scandal was shooting, I think, while
Okay.
we were there, and then we shot LAX, and
Wow.
yeah, we
That's
shot all over the
tough.
place for that movie. And that's the film, which is A Leading Man,
Hmm.
where I met John Michael Condrath, who is the founder and CEO of Rekon Productions.
Hmm.
And he fairly quickly realized that I was a rather useful individual.
A badass.
Yeah.
That's what you.
That's
That's what he realized.
that's what it was. And he kind of started offering me opportunities with Rekon and pulling me into the fold. Rekon Productions was the production company on A Leading Man. And he started pulling me into the fold of the company. And I really enjoy Recon. The basis of the company itself is very experienced producers who want to do a good job got together and started providing services to people. And I say that like as clearly as possible because I've always joked with John Michael Condrath that he is possibly one of the best line producers I've ever worked with.
Awesome.
Um,
Wow.
and so there's just something to that where it's like when you find people who are really good at things, you kind of stick to them.
Hmm. You
And
learn a
then,
lot.
yeah, you learn a lot. And then, you know, uh, from there, I became the chief operating officer and a partner at Recon 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 2016, 2016.
Nice.
So 4 years ago, and we've definitely expanded quite a bit from that first meeting, from
Hmm.
the handful of producers to now we have six divisions, and we
That's
make anywhere.
outstanding.
It's yeah, it's great. It's really it's a lot of fun. It is very much what you make of it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what independent filmmaking is, and we're graced with a lot of knowledge and experience, and not a lot of fear in terms of like how to do the work that nobody else wants to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it makes us a really fun place to be, and it's always like going to work with your friends.
Oh, that's amazing. I think
Yeah.
honestly, when you're able to have a mentor or someone that you respect who's been in the game, is super experienced, that can help you, but also can be your friend at the same time, you grow together with a company with like-minded individuals. That's like the best way to kind of just enhance your skills and also feel fulfilled, and also just feel like you're part of something that's more than just creating a cool video or a film. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, like, not to detract from John's experience, but him and I are basically contemporaries. We just came up
mhm.
different ways.
Mhm.
So I have more experience in things like coordinating, and he came up as like grip. So we have
Yeah.
like kind of very different, there goes back to that even base idea of I already knew paperwork, and
Yeah.
he knows technicalities. Like I still don't know what half of the equipment is. Like I can tell you what it does, and I can look at a list that a DP sends me and go, but you don't really need that. Like
Mhm.
that you don't that's an extra. Like tell me
Mhm.
what you're gonna do with that. What are you providing me with
There's
that?
way
But
too many
that's
stingers in there. What are you
yeah.
doing?
No, I mean like that's stingers, but like everybody for a while, not so much anymore, but like for a while everybody wanted a sky panel.
Oh, yeah, of
Like
course,
why?
S6s. You don't need an S6.
Yeah, like why? You're lighting a hallway.
Exactly.
Like
Oh, I love it. I love it because it's so true. When you have a grip or someone who knows set life, you understand that you can make anything work with just the right creativity and the basics. Like you can do enough lighting with a RE650 kit or with like three LED light panels, some diffusion, some flags, and some reflectors. And I think that it's awesome to hear your story because you started as a talent, in front of the camera, and then got into the business side of things, and then jumped into location management, and then being an agent. And what's great is I used to be a manager, so I understand the idea of having clients and being responsible for the food on their table to look for jobs, or else they're not going to pay rent for the next month. And it's a pressure. At the same time, you also have to be the cheerleader for all of your clients and make them look and sound incredibly talented to get them sold onto that show or to sell their project or whatnot. And so it's a lot of pitching. So you've learned the pitch, you learn the sales, and with production, it just sounds like you're just so well rounded, which is what
no.
people need to be these days,
Yeah.
because just the way that it works, you're dealing with young YouTubers who are basically that. They're their own producer, director, DP, gaff, grip. They don't even know what those words mean. And writers. And at the same time, they're their own marketers. So you have these YouTubers who are basically online marketers, at the same time content creators, and then directors. Because I'm a YouTuber because I started
Mhm.
off in filmmaking, and so the idea of being well rounded. I know a lot of people look down and frown upon it, though it also gives you range. And I think there's a lot of arguments now about how having a lot of talents and skills in multiple I would say like industries or multiple just like crafts or mediums, it gives you range. And so if I was going to say, I need to, DP this set, this feature, but at the same time produce it and then figure out the content marketing strategy, at least I can say something to those departments that doesn't make me sound like a total noob. And so it's amazing that like your story started off that way. And so in your mind, being in the film industry and being where you are right now, how has filmmaking changed now that you're in, 2020, when you first started, early 2000s or late 90s? Well, like, how have you seen the change when it comes to technology and also on how productions work?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the the change for me, like I've been in the production or producing world, what, or really I've been in film industry for 25 some years, give or take,
Hmm.
right? And I think that I'm not quite sure I can answer the question in terms of like what's changed. I
Hmm.
in like over time, so much as I can talk about how much it's expanded, right?
Hmm.
So
Yep.
you go from something like in 1993 when they shot Little Rascals, and it's
Hmm.
this massive um Hollywood production, and then not maybe just because I'm eight, because now I think about it and I'm like, no, it's pretty big. Uh, um, it's this
That's a
massive
big
production.
franchise.
It's
Yeah.
it's a big franchise. They spent a lot of money. There was a lot of cameos in it. There was,
Hmm.
like they set up an entire fair, out on the side of a hill, and you think about that, and just the scope of that, but then the budget range of that, and the budget range of that, and like Don Juan de Marco, which is a Johnny Depp Marlon Brando film that I was also
Hmm.
in. The
Hmm.
scope of those two films are like, and I'm gonna guess because I haven't looked at it in a while. Oh, sorry. Um, the scope of those two films, I'm assuming, is around 15, 20 million, like as a budget, maybe that high. That scope doesn't exist really anymore,
Hmm.
right? Even for the studios, like not really. We've moved on to making tentpole films on the studio side. The lower end, it's hard to make anything between like 3 and 7 million. It's that
Mm.
there's ranges that have like kind of changed and shifted, and now I think
Yeah.
we might be shifting back a little bit towards that
Yeah.
because of the streaming network
Yeah.
side of everything, right? And so now there's a little bit more flexibility in some of those budgets because of where they're going, right?
Yeah.
So I know that on some level I think has changed, just from my perspective, but also um, it I've never worked really with film.
Hmm.
I've almost always worked digital, and I say that a little apprehensively because, like, again, the feature that we just wrapped
Hmm.
shot on film.
Oh, wow. Okay. Got it.
And
How
we've
to
we've
develop it and everything.
yeah, so like the company has worked on projects with film, but like me personally as a producer or in any of my positions prior, haven't really done a lot with film, like physical film.
Hmm.
um I'm fascinated by it, but like a lot of the time now we're working on digital, and so many things in digital are they're faster, sometimes it's cheaper, and sometimes you can just control what you want more than you can
Hmm.
on film. So there's a lot of that I think has also changed, but there's still this like shift where it's pull and tug, but a lot of it is digital, right?
Hmm.
Where like in
Hmm.
the 90s, I don't think it was really there yet.
Yeah.
And so I know that that has changed. And then like from a personal perspective, my scope has changed. Like my
Mm.
personal scope has changed, right? So I don't, I could go onto a film set in the beginning of my career and somebody was taking care of things,
Mhm.
right? It's that joke a little bit that I now tell my teams, where it's like when people say production will take care of it, what they mean is that it will magically happen. And I'm the magic now. Like
Mhm.
that's who I
Mhm.
am now. Like I don't walk on and expect somebody else to take care of something. I don't expect almost anybody to take care of anything. I mean, I do. I expect people to do their jobs, but
Yes, the
in
responsibility is on you at the end
right,
of the day.
right, right. And so like I walk onto a film set now and it's, I know where everything is and where everybody is and what needs to get done because my
Mhm.
scope has drastically changed from the beginning of my career.
That's amazing, and I think that as a producer, it helps you solve a lot of problems, but also make sure that the creative is also comfortable and feels safe and feels confident in the production so that the vision can go through. Because I know we had a conversation like this before, and how creatives, it's hard for them to think pragmatically and logically sometimes, because being a creative, like you have to create something from nothing, and it's this. Being an artist, it's hard to explain if you don't have that mindset of like, I just want to be free and create. I don't want any restrictions. I don't want anything to be in my way as I create. At the same time, there should be some restrictions for creativity. And sometimes putting some restrictions on creativity, like having a script for actors rather than, improving everything, gives more freedom for that actor. Same thing with the director and shot list and the script itself. They're giving someone a restriction, a creative person a restriction. I've talked to a lot of people about this. It gives you more freedom because you actually don't have what is it, decision paralysis, where you have way too many things available to you to choose from. Like, it's kind of like Netflix right now. So it's like, why don't just give me NBC channel 4? All right, I'm just gonna watch anything you give to me at 8 p.m.
It's just what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
I mean, I related a lot to the idea of a train track, right?
Hmm.
So what we're providing is a train track for your train to be on, and you can
Hmm.
do that while the train is moving. You're putting down track, which is how some independent production definitely works. But then there are other cases in which you could have the track laid down for a little while, like you know where your stops are going to be.
Hmm.
And it's better than like if you just put a train and had no track, like where it's just going to get lost in the nearest forest or fall off a cliff. Like it's not, there's nowhere to go. Like it's really hard to be able to do the work that we do
Hmm.
without any lines that we're working within.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and and for you, when you do work with a first time director or a filmmaker, um as a producer, what are kind of like the common mistakes or the common parameters you usually have to put up when you're working with a first time director? Do you always say, you know what, we're gonna pair him up with a good DP, and then find a a really great AD for him, and then just make sure that we have these certain plan B's and C's and D's in place? Like, what are the kind of like the common things you always do whenever you work with a new filmmaker or director?
So, I mean, Recon Productions is a home for independent filmmakers, and a lot of
Hmm.
independent filmmakers come to the table with some experience at different things. Like it might be a DP that's finally flipping into being a director,
Hmm.
or a writer who wants to direct their first script, or somebody who's made 3 short films and is now directing their feature. And so we do deal with a lot of people who come at the table with almost kind of the same Mod Podge of experience that I have, right?
Hmm.
In a different capacity. And I don't I don't have a standard one size fits all. And the
Hmm.
company doesn't, and film industry doesn't. Not really
Hmm.
anyway. Not that works for everybody. And so a lot of the time it's about what that individual or that filmmaker needs.
Hmm.
Is it like, are they really good at this? Are they really good at that? And they just need some help here and there. And I think what really comes down to it, like what it is, I think with everyone, um, especially in the independent world, is what lane do you want to be in? Right? We go back to that master of all, the jack of all trades concept. Um, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to do everything, because there
Hmm.
isn't, but there is something that is, you're taking away opportunities for growth
Hmm.
if you don't focus sometimes. And if you don't focus when you have a team that's willing to be your support network, you're kind of squandering that opportunity a little bit, right?
That's
And
right.
it's like, if you want to learn how to, if you want to be a director, be the director in this moment then, right? If you want to direct and produce, fine, we can have that conversation as well. But no director who is also producing can do both of those things simultaneously.
Hmm.
They just can't, it's not a real ask.
Hmm.
And so it's a lot of that conversation. It's like, what do you want out of the experience? Like, why are you making this film independently? Like, you're not working for Paramount, no, you're not working for Sony, you're not working at Disney. And that may be where you want to go, and that's great. But like, why are you making this project right now in this capacity? And what do you want out of it? Because that's where I base, and most of the company base, how we help elevate people,
Hmm.
right? Because as a company that services independent filmmakers, our intent is to elevate people.
Hmm.
People make independent projects because they have a passion for them, because they want the experience, because they want to move their career in a certain direction. And I'm there, and Recon Productions is there to help them execute something and have something to hold up at the end of it and be like, this is what I made.
Hmm.
And so that's, I think, first time filmmakers, it's and and even halfway through your career, filmmakers, like maybe you're making a shift in tone of what you want to do. Or I worked with a director who wanted some more commercial work, and so we did
Hmm.
commercial work. Like it's just, it depends on what you want. And I get told a lot that I actually am one of the few people who's ever asked people, what is it that you want to do?
That's amazing. 'Cause
So yeah.
no, that's a great answer because the director these days, I think for me, because I grew up watching a lot of, the like 80s and 90s Hollywood. And then when I went to film school, it was like the classics, of course, Orson Welles and Hitchcock and then Fellini. And I got into the whole like film history of cinema. And every time you think of a director, you think of the auteur. You think of the guy on set like Kubrick or like Fellini, who is just out there being completely creative. And I am the director. This is my vision. I have a team to get that vision across. And then when digital filmmaking and YouTube came around, and the whole idea of videography and picking up a DSLR and going out and shooting YouTube videos and social media videos and branding and marketing videos, the idea of the director now has become this: are you going to be that jack of all trades, that one man band? And I had this conversation with the CDDP, the Commercial Directors Diversity Program, and I'm going through their mentorship program, and we're talking about a lot of the people that were on this call, a lot of great talent. We were all One of the people was saying, how are we going to deal with all these one man bands out there who does everything on Instagram with all these followers? And I'm over here because I'm that guy. I'm like, I got 160,000 subscribers on YouTube. I got my 10K plus on Instagram. I'm a one man band. I do all of that. And I realized it's a challenge to be that type of person and then have directing as your focus, because just this year I've had a lot of productions where I've just was the director, and that was able to give me so much more relief and freedom and creativity to basically create the best version of that video, rather than worrying about how am I going to get sound, how am I going to light this, and how am I going to operate the camera while asking the questions and then doing this and that. So it's great that you say that, because I think that directors and creatives need to focus on one thing when they're hired for that. And it's really building trust with that team. And so with that in mind, in your years of producing, like, what is your, I would say, secrets, advice, or your formula of a good team? Because you have Rekon Productions and you've done so many productions together, so many films. Like, what do you think makes up a great production and a great team?
So the elements of successful production, for myself and for Recon Productions is, it it comes back to that idea of setting what the expectation is with the filmmaker that we're working with, right? So success is about achieving that mandate from
Hmm.
them, whatever it is, and making that as clear as possible. Um, it is about a finished product, and preferably one that people are proud of. It is, and it is about making it as easy as possible. There is a lot of, there's a lot of discourse about production and production department in general. And the thing about production department, is that if they're doing their jobs well, you don't notice. And if
That's
they're doing
right.
their jobs poorly, you absolutely notice.
That's where you get the emails and texts.
Yeah, like everybody notices. But most of the time, I've had pretty awful experiences on the producing side in terms of like things just going terribly, terribly wrong. Um, and I will talk to those casts and those crews and not a clue, not a clue. Like they had no idea that things were going that badly or that that even happened, or like it's that is, I think, one of the truest signs of success from a producer production side.
Hmm.
In terms of the project, you want people to feel safe, you want people to feel comfortable, you want people to achieve what they're setting out to achieve. Like
Mm.
that's the thing about filmmaking, right? It's not an endless cycle. Like not really. Like you go into a film or into a commercial or a short film or whatever have you with the idea that you're going to finish at some point. And so it's what's that finish line, and are you happy once you get there? And did you elevate throughout the process, right? Like,
Mm.
did you become better at something? Did you learn something? Did you find joy in some piece of it? Like, whatever it is that makes your life what you want it to be. For me, going into a project, like, I'm either helping somebody, I'm either learning something, or I'm doing it because I really care about the story that we're telling. And it's one of those three, and ultimately most of the time it's at least two of those. And so it's that success is a subjective experience.
Yes, it is.
And I think that the only real like objective success is, did you make something? Is it done?
Yes, exactly.
Like, did it get somewhere? Even
Yeah.
did it get somewhere is a completely different question, right? Because you can have a
Right.
film, like one of the first films I co-produced isn't out in the world, and it probably never will be.
Mm.
And so but I made it. I,
Yeah.
I I experienced it, and I learned things from it, and it brought about some great friendships, and it definitely elevated my career. So of course, like, it exists for me, but it doesn't exist for the rest of the world. But when I went into making that, I was fairly young, but I also, like, the only idea I had in my head was I'm making it. So
Hmm.
I achieved what I set out to do.
No, I love that answer. It really is about what is your first expectation at the beginning of the production. What is your expectation of success? What are those goals? Because each one is different. Because it is true what you said. Sometimes you work on a project for the money. Sometimes you work on a project for the prestige. Sometimes you work on it because you love the person you're working with. And sometimes, like you said, you want to learn and expand. You wouldn't have learned and expanded if you didn't do the location scouting or the
Right.
below the line agent work, because that has given you the tools to become a producer. Because for you to be a below the line agent, you knew how to crew up. What were the basic building blocks of a production,
Right.
and that is actually really important, especially when it comes to budget, because then it's like, what is the most basic? That's actually a question. That's a really good question for you, actually. What is the most, if I had to have a crew of 5 people
Okay.
on a crew, and I had to get this video done, this short film done, and I only had 5 people to crew up because of
Mhm.
COVID. I don't even think about COVID, just in general. What would those roles be?
The 5 people on your set?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on a couple of things.
Yeah.
It depends on, see, and this is this is a little bit, I think, where I'm not setting out to make the project that I want to make. I'm
Mm-hmm.
setting out to make the project that my filmmaker wants to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if it's you that's coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to make this short film, and I want to make it with only 5 people," I turn that around and be like, okay, well, why 5 people? And then I would follow up with, okay, so what roles do you want to work with? Like,
Mm,
if you already know how to operate a camera, do you want to operate the camera? And if you do, why? Like, what does that take or detract? Or are
mm-hmm.
you trying to make it with 5 people because you don't think you want to spend more money, or you don't want to raise more money? And then it's like, okay, great. Like, we have an answer to that. But then where do you want to take this short film? Is it going
Yeah.
to festivals, or are you putting it up online? Like, what is your intent with it?
Mm-hmm.
You don't make money back on a short film.
Yep.
So, like, that's a basic that's a basic understanding of short films. But they do provide you with leverage in your own career, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just a question of, like, how are you using that leverage, and why do you want that? So
Mm-hmm.
with that kind of crew, like, if you want 5 people, and it also depends on what the creative is, because,
Yeah,
like,
that's
if
right.
it's if it's if it's a one page, 2 people at a table, and you want to use your apartment, because
There you
that's
go.
that's the thing about independence as well, right? So independent filmmakers or social influencers, or people who come in with the kind of experience that we're talking about, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, but I can do this with 4 people, and in my mom's backyard, and, like, I have a couple of lights that my friend down the street has, and we'll just feed everybody from, like, this local place. And that's all great and good. It really is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
marvelous way to be able to create content. But we talk about scaling. right?
Yeah.
And in the scaling of your own career and the scaling of your own experience and all of this jazz. And I didn't used to think about it necessarily exactly that way. It was always for me about elevating. But I've recently I'm part of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurs Initiative for
Nice.
scaling. And I just started the program and I'm in the 10th cohort. And so like now that word is like ingrained into my head a little bit because
Yeah.
that is what it is. Like you like ultimately independent filmmakers are scaling their own careers
Mm-hmm.
throughout their lifetime. If that's how they say or that, that's what they decide to do. And so to do that, you have to keep kind of not always upping your game, but like change, like you up your game. And then if you're
Innovating.
innovating and if you're comfortable, and like that's the blessing of independent filmmaking as well,
Mm-hmm.
is that you have to be creative.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. And so the idea of making something with 5 people doesn't make me bulk. Like you can make a ton of things with 5 people. It's
Mm-hmm.
just which 5 people.
Yeah.
And is it 5 people on set? Like, is your producer from afar? Like, I produced my first piece of content in the COVID era in July, and I produced from a Zoom room,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
was bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it's that kind of it's such a collaborative process, which even goes back to like something that you said a little bit earlier about this auteur concept that we all kind of have seen or grown up with or experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a lovely concept, but I think a lot of it is an illusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
no one auteur ever made everything themselves. Like
That's
they had
right.
massive teams of people behind them, whether they acknowledge them or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is that idea where it's like that's an illusion and that's great. And sometimes you want to prop those people up because they are visionaries, but they absolutely had help.
Oh yeah. It's great you say that because a lot of great filmmakers would be tied with a great producer
Hmm.
sometimes or with a great DP.
Hmm.
You look, you got the Weinsteins and Tarantino. I'm just like in the beginning of the 90s. You have a lot of people who have that team that they will always work with to bring that vision across. And I think that, it's great that you said, it really just depends on production. Because if it's a music video, then I don't need someone to sound.
Right.
Really,
Right.
it's just because I'm actually doing a short film next month, and it's like I can only have 5 people because of my budget. So I'm gonna have a gaff, I'm gonna have my DP, I'm gonna have my sound guy, and then maybe a PA, and then like a producer. But speaking of creative, working with directors, filmmakers, artists in general, even yourself, how have you found would be the best way to get someone or yourself in the creative flow or to get like a set, into that creative flow? Like what would be like that? What have you noticed with yourself or with other filmmakers to really create that creativity? And I know that there's a lot of different filmmakers out there, so you probably say it depends on the filmmaker. But how
Right.
about yourself? And like when you are on set, or you need to come up with a pitch, or you need to be creative. How do you get into your creative flow?
So I have two different creative flows. I have a
Mm-hmm.
creative flow as a producer, and then
Mm-hmm.
I have a creative flow as like whatever creative thing I'm delving into. Because I also write. Sometimes I paint. Like I went into the film industry because I'm a fan and a studier of the arts,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And so as a producer, and as what a producer is with the problem solving and just on some level everybody's therapist, and all of these other things, and even on the creative side too, I am a stream of thought consciousness person, right? So sometimes it'll be just conversation. Like I'm really much more comfortable in an out loud conversation, especially if it's a
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. So like a key example is one of my directors once we were making a fairly massive short film. And there was a lot of things happening. There were a lot of elements to it. There were a lot of moving parts. It was a very specific kind of experience. And she was kind of having a bit of a panic about everything, and so she had
Mm.
gotten into the habit of walking into my office and closing the door and pacing and talking about what her like panic was. And I'm a fairly calm person, so I was like, well, why is that bothering you? Like, and
Mm.
how does that impact what you're doing? And like, why does that? And I'm a questioner, right? So like I try to get to people to figure out why they're feeling what they're feeling or why they
Mm,
want to do what they're doing. And that helps with the creative process generally, because then I can present more options
yeah.
that fit with what's going on. And like if I'm trying to solve a problem, to the annoyance of some level to my CEO and my business partner, I like to talk out loud. Like I like to talk through it. I like to lie on one of the 7 couches in our office and be like, so like, what do you think about this? Or or like, how does this like relate to that? And I connect things in
Mm.
really fast and odd ways. And he jokes a lot that like my train of thought jumps 4 depots before I say something out loud. And then he has to be like, what are you talking about? So like generally I like to kind of talk through it. Sometimes I'm doing it directly, sometimes I'm
Mm,
doing it through context. So like we talk a lot about film and television and books. Like I read a ton, and
mhm.
sometimes I'll just walk in and be like, so like this happened in the novel I was reading and it connects to this thing that we're talking about doing, and I was thinking about maybe adding this part from over here. And it's just this like conglomeration of like my existence or my world,
Mm.
and me just being like, here's what I have. Like, do you love it? Like, how do you connect to it? And like, how can I make that something else? And that's a lot of what my process tends to be. I
Mhm.
am inspired by being inspired.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's great. I think it's I think when you're able to voice things out and get it out of your mind, it actually helps you grab the muse, the one that's w- flying around in the air. And if you don't have a pen or a paper, or you can't say it out loud, so no one can like remember it, you're gonna lose that muse. You're gonna lose that idea. So it's amazing that that's like your creative process. And I could just imagine your production office of just a lot of talking, just people pacing around, talking about their problems, you connecting random thoughts, and then people.
Or music, or sometimes it's just sketching. Like I doodled a lot on my notes in school, and I'm just like, this is who I've always been. Like I've always been this like random connector of things.
Oh, that's cool. I can just see your notepad when you're on set. You're just drawing a bunch of stuff, and it's just gonna be little rascals and Jumanji photos.
Just like
Uh,
that, just like this is where everything originated from.
exactly. But Lesley, you know what? Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And before we go, I know you're busy. We're both busy entrepreneurs and producers and business owners out there. So before we go, I wanted to know in your like years of being a COO and being in a production company, like what is your advice for people who do want to start their own production company, or create a media agency? These days a lot of people are doing that, a lot of young directors or YouTubers or whatnot. They want to say, I want my own production company. Like in your mind, like what is your advice, and kind of like what do you feel like are the success tips for someone who wants to run and own a production company?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know, to put you on the spot.
Sometimes no, and sometimes when people ask me, I'm like, well, just don't. But I say that because it's a lot of work.
Hmm.
It's a lot of work, and in my experience personally, and just like speaking to other people, you don't really know how much work it's going to be. Like it's not a tangible like scoped out thing. Like you just
Hmm.
it starts and then you're doing a lot of work. I think that if it's something that you really want to do, you should absolutely do it. And I think that if it's something that you really want to do, you should figure out what that looks like or what that means, because companies also are very different. Like my company is very big.
Hmm.
It's very big, and it has its hands and everything, and it's a little bit of an octopus. But there's other production companies where it's like we only do this,
Mm.
and I got told a lot a couple of years back that like Rekon should niche, and I was like,
Mm.
no, that's not our cup of tea. It's not our thing, and we don't want to do it that way, because if we did, then we'd get bored. But
Mm.
that's who we are, and it is massive and unruly on a lot of occasions. But if you want to start a company, it's like, what is it that you want? It's the same thing as when you start a film or a
That's right.
project, right? And it always goes back to that same concept, because that's a big idea in filmmaking anyways. Each project is its own company, is its own business. It's an entity, and it exists for this much time, but you have to go at it that way. And so if
Mhm.
you're going to start a company, is it a company that you're going to start for 5 years? Do you want a company to last 50 years? Or like, do you, and you know, if that's what you want, do you want to run a company? Like, do you want to be the one who fixes the copier when it doesn't work? Or figures out why the Wi-Fi went down, or deals with a 45-page commercial lease? Because like, let me tell you, not so much fun. It's not you know, but that they are parts of that. And being a business owner and being an entrepreneur is a whole nother layer to the film industry.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you went into it to be a filmmaker, having a company may not be what you actually want. And so you really want to explore that. And maybe it's something that you do to like set up to do the next thing that you want. And I know that I talk a lot about that foresight, and that's very, very hard. It's very hard for individuals. It's very hard for companies. It's very hard for everybody. But I think that in the long run, you will benefit greatly if you understand why you want to do something.
Hmm.
And starting a company can be great fun. But it's again, it's why are you doing that? Like, I
Hmm.
had a filmmaker who had 5 companies. And we had a
Wow.
conversation where he was just like, well, like, what do you do with companies when you stop using them? And I was like, you close them.
Close to.
You know, but again, it's these processes where it's like, you have to figure out how to do that stuff.
Mm.
Unless you have a mentor or like a business partner that cares about business, like it is gonna all fall on you, or however you structure your company. And maybe you
Hmm.
structure it differently, because like there are thousands of ways to structure a company, but it is it is more work than you think it's gonna be. That I can tell you hands down.
Yes, that is such a great answer and advice for any creative videographer, anyone who is a filmmaker out there. Having your own production company isn't something that's going to give you all this new freedom because you don't have to listen to anybody. It actually gives you more work. So
Mhm.
take it from Lesley. Okay. There is a lot of things you got to handle, and having your own office and studio may seem cool until you see that lease, because there are a lot of stipulations and a monthly rent that you're gonna have to pay. But thank you so much, Lesley. I really
Of
enjoyed
course.
our conversation today. As a filmmaker, also as a producer, it's really cool to have these conversations, and I think it's going to help a lot of people out there who are filmmakers, and also people who are just interested in creating videos. So thank you so much. And before we go, can you just let people know where to find you and how we can support?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at laces716, or Instagram. It's the same handle. And then you can find Rekon Productions at rekonproductions.com, or at Rekon Prods on both Twitter and Instagram. And either way, if you guys have anything that you need help with, or you want to consult, or you just want to explore what we do, feel free to send us a DM, send us an email, give the office a call. There's 1,000 ways to get into contact with us, but we are around. We are currently operating, and always kind of around to help.
Love it. Thank you so much, Lesley. Your
Of course.
phone line is actually open. It's not screening. They're actually
It-
taking calls, guys. So to
It's
call them.
true. That's true. I will warn everybody that we are technically working from home, so sometimes we don't get back to you right away, because
Mhm.
figuring out how to work from home when you had an office operation is its own adventure.
Very true. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. Appreciate everything. Good luck with your feature film you just wrapped, and congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
we'll keep in touch. Thank
Great.
you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating, and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com, and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.